Welcome to class with Professor Mead. Today we're going to talk about some core concepts in sociology of family that you would want to understand as you're reading through articles discussing this. In sociology of family, when the concept of family or the institution of family is looked at, it's looked at both through the macro and the micro level perspectives. You know, in the media, you might hear a politician use the singular form family, and there's trying to signify that there's only like one proper type of family, that ideal type, right? The dominant groups. It's the heteronormative, nuclear, white, upper middle class family, right? That's what they want you to think of when they use that singular form. But in sociology, family is a form of an institution in and of itself. The structure of family, when we examine it from a macro level or as an institution, what contributions do family as a society of families contribute to the public welfare, right? If you look at that relationship from a macro level, you're looking at it through the lens of the public family. That would be the concept term used in sociology. When you look at or examine family, what it provides in terms of love and intimacy and fulfillment for individuals within the family, for relationships to kin and community, you're looking at micro level perspectives, or what we would call the private family. So we almost always think of family on a private family level or a micro level, right? We think about relationships, intimacy, marriages, that micro level perspective. But today we can find it useful to also look at family on a macro level, because the definition itself is extremely important to our society, not just politically, culturally, economically, in a variety of different ways. It is, of course, also extremely important to us emotionally, culturally, and economically on a micro level through individuals. But today we see the consequence of not being able to send children into the classroom as a consequence of what happens to parents in that they're trying to care for children, educate them, and also be a two-earner household in a society where we expected the public family to take care of our children for approximately 8 hours a day. When we send things out to be accomplished outside the home, like education, religion, judiciary system, all of those things, that's the public family. So let's kind of look at some of these things. So the public family, right, is one or two adults who are related by marriage, partnership, or shared parenthood, and who are taking care of some kind of dependents, elderly, children, that kind of thing. Family costs and benefits society. So the family's cost and things that they're doing within to benefit society may not be fully compensated. So you don't get back everything that you give in taxes all the time. Or you may be a teacher, but that doesn't mean that your children are going to be fully compensated in how they're educated, right? So it might be an uneven distribution. For example, in California, we pay $1.25 in taxes for every dollar that we get back in social welfare programs, because even though we pay state and federal taxes, the country's run on a federal level in that terms. Whereas in Texas, they pay 75 cents on the dollar in taxes for the public service programs that they use. In other words, Californians foot the bill for Texans because Texans aren't paying their share in taxes for social services that they're getting back. They're paying less than what they're getting back. We're paying more. So you might not be fully compensated, right? You can create and enjoy public goods from your society, even if you don't produce it yourself, right? You can send your children to school. And then your children get an education, even if you're not a teacher, you can, somebody can be arrested and tried and punished for burglarizing your home, and you don't have to be the person who arrests them, tries them, or even keeps them in prison. In the early 19th century, in the colonial era, families often not only educated their children in the home, because that was a private family thing that we did for our society, but we also taught pretty much everybody about religion in the home. We did most of our health care in the home. Most babies were born in the home by a midwife, and most people died in their beds also with a midwife, probably the same midwife. And so those were all private family functions. Today, if you're sick and you're dying, you go to a hospital. If you're giving birth, you go to a hospital. So it becomes a public family function. If you're going to school, you usually leave, right? So we've seen that shift and what kind of dynamic that can take its toll on everybody, right? If you are a society that had education as a public family function, and you now have children in the home and you have to teach them at home while also working, because we're all expected to be dual earners in our society, or we may only have one earner in the household and one adult in the household, we see how difficult it can be to make those public family functions into private ones, right? Those things that are taken care of through institutions on the macro level have now been put back in our house, right? For us to do on the micro level on our own. You can contribute to those things and not personally access the resources, or you can access resources and not personally contribute. That's why we have that, what we call public family or macro level institutional practices, so that theoretically it spreads everything out, right? I still pay taxes for street lights even if I never go out and drive at night. On a private family, the definition would be two or more individuals who maintain an intimate relationship that expect it will last indefinitely or until their children reach adulthood. They usually live in the same household, and they pool their incomes in household labor, right? So private family, of course, is what we would normally think of. It's that nuclear, core, intimate, micro level perspective of family. And I've kind of talked to you already about how if we pull those macro level access to resources down onto a micro level within the family, into the private family, it can create stress or relieve stress for the particular families. Kinship. So kinship can be created or assigned, meaning you might be assigned at birth to who you're related to who is considered family or not, but it may also be an achieved status, which means that you did something to achieve it. Anytime you have to actively construct a relationship, like when you meet somebody and you date and you fall in love and you decide to get married, that's an achieved status because you're doing something to actively make that person part of your family. Or if you move in together, share resources, that type of thing, and rely on each other, even if you're not biologically related, that is created kinship. Most of the time, women do the job of maintaining kin networks, meaning that we're the ones that reach out to family. We're the ones that create holidays. I say we just because I identify as a woman, right? So women are the ones that, create the holidays, push to go to the religious institutions, that they keep in contact with parents and grandchildren. Those are the things that actively create kinship networks, and it's generally women who do it. They tend to be more linked to the private family kin networks. Now, When it comes to social class, another concept that is really important to know is called two concepts really, concerted cultivation and natural growth. So the concerted cultivation is something that sociology of family researchers have found that middle class families tend to do. And what they tend to do is they tend to try to enhance their children's talents and skills and opinions, right? So children are taught to be able to question. When they're asked to do something, a middle class parent's more likely to reason with them instead of just telling them to do it. They're very much constantly monitored and engaged. So they're going to, sports, or they're going to some kind of activity or parties. They also tend to have more access with parents and into their institutions. So they tend to be able to gain more from the institutions because the parents are working in hand, basically as advocates for their children. While middle working class children and poor children families tend to take the perspective of what we call natural growth. And that means that they emphasize providing a safe and loving environment. They try to let children grow on their own, so they're more likely to tell children to go outside and play, to figure out what to do, to be creative. They spend a lot more time with kin networks because kin networks are part of the social capital that working class and poor families tend to rely on. They tend to have a lot stronger social capital in that regard with their kin networks. Less social capital, though, within the institutions, like access to their jobs or other living wage jobs, or access to schools and school counselors and healthcare professionals and all of those people, right? So they have less networking capability there. Social capital is to know how to network through those types of things, like being comfortable with going to your teacher's office hours, going to see a counselor, and navigating all of those things. That's social capital. Working class families tend to do better with the social capital that focuses on family, friends, and other kin network in their community. Middle class families tend to be better at accessing their social capital within the institutional networks, business networks, educational networks, healthcare networks, those kinds of things. So where does this come from? So this is what was mentioned in your article, but the old model comes from research from this guy named Kahn in the 1960s, and it didn't have names yet, but essentially he worded it like this. It's going to sound funny to our ears. Middle class parents emphasize independence and self-direction. They're more likely to be controlling and to give harsher punishment. Middle class parents tend to emphasize independence and self-direction and tend to be less controlling of their children and give less direction and expect their children to maybe debate with them about what it is they're allowed to do. Poor and working class parents tend to emphasize conformity and obedience to authority and tend to not emphasize being independent and more about listening to what you're supposed to be, what you're told to do. So you can see how the theory has emerged, changed for a more appropriate perspective today, but where it really comes from too sounds a little bit odd to us, I think. Okay, just a couple little facts, kind of as background to the article that you're reading. Inequality in America is skyrocketing. Today we have the biggest economic gap that we've ever seen in the history of the United States, really. So it's increased insanely dramatically over the past several decades. In the 60s and 70s, you could readily get a job that had a living wage, usually for a single earner household with just a high school education. And today that's next to impossible. The growth of job opportunities has been for people at the very, very, very top of the economic ladder and for the bottom of the economic ladder, meaning that everybody in the middle is really scraping for those few economic opportunities. There's not job growth there where we want to see it in America. And then the jobs that did have a living wage in the 1960s and 70s have essentially the same wage, so they're no longer a living wage. In the 70s, an electrician earned about 20 something dollars an hour. Today, an electrician still earns about 20 something dollars an hour. So pay's not kept up with the cost of living. Prices of goods continue to increase, but our pay has stayed pretty much stagnant. At the same time, everybody's trying to go to college. They're trying to have that middle class lifestyle. Education and a college degree has increased dramatically. When you are educated, you tend to get married later. You're able to postpone it, and therefore you're able to have a higher income with a dual earner income, and then you're less likely to get divorced because of that. And you are, even though you're less likely to be married at the same time as your non-educated colleagues and friends, you're more likely to have a relationship that will last through your lifetime. Not just because you got married later, but also because you are likely to have more financial stability throughout your life. On top of that, our culture is extremely consumeristic, extremely individualistic, and we expect not only higher standards of living, but we also expect in our society these kind of ideals of I should have a job that I'm happy with, that I'm passionate about. I should have this marriage that is perfect and wonderful, and I will be in love, quote unquote, forever, right? And that I should expect to have all the trappings of hyper-consumerism success. I'm going to have a big house and a nice car and lots of clothes and all of these things, right? So we're seeing that we have been really capable at teaching or getting people to internalize the idea of a success within our society, but people literally don't have, less and less people literally have the access to resources to be able to fulfill that ideal type of life. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too long. Macro level perspective, right? How would you see or perceive the well-being of American families today? And then how would you perceive that on a micro level from your family? And what do you think some of the negative consequences of classism are today in terms of family dynamics? This is your reluctant YouTube professor signing off. Have a great day.